New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here. I just love that beat underneath that intro. So yeah, you caught me dancing just a little bit, rocking to the music on this Saturday morning. Welcome to the New Thought Media Network and to the Saturday morning Science of Mind Conversation series. That is a mouthful. Saturday morning, we get together and we have a conversation about the science of mind philosophy, what it means, what's written in the book, how we apply it in the real world. And in the last few weeks, we have been going through part 3, which really goes through the chapters that remind us what is spiritual mind healing all about and how can we use it. So there's an earlier section in the Science of Mind book that describes what spiritual mind healing is. But in this part 3, it's all about applying it. So if by some chance you have not heard any of those or watched or participated in any of those weeks, then I strongly recommend that you go to YouTube or that you do a search within Facebook and check out the archives, because this part 3 in the book is so powerful to build the bridge between understanding and action. It's one thing to master the intellectual understanding. It's something else to embody it in the way that you apply what you have learned. So we are going to focus today on chapter 19, which begins on page 308, and pull together the key points that Ernest Holmes wanted us to remember about applying spiritual mind healing, or as the chapter title indicates, the practice of spiritual mind healing. And before I dive into that, just in case somebody is looking for going to get their copy of the Science of Mind book, I just want to make a comment that is probably true 52 weeks of the year, of every year. But today it seems especially important to remind myself and all of you that the reason we study and practice is so that we can use these principles to navigate what is going on in the world. And every week I could probably say, whatever's going on in your world, whatever ups and downs, whatever challenges you're facing, whatever things have upset you or confused you, this is the perfect time to remember you have spiritual tools and a spiritual foundation. And knowing that people will watch this recording, that statement is true no matter when you are watching it. But there is a lot of strife, a lot of confusion, a lot of pain, sorrow, anger, and at the same time, there are some people who are really happy about decisions made by the Supreme Court. There are still things that are being discussed in the news and in spiritual communities around the violence in the Ukraine. There are things that have been in the news this week that are really painful or scary in Africa, in other parts of the world. It just feels like today, if I'm going to talk about the practice of spiritual mind healing, I want to invite you to take in everything that comes up during our time together this morning and apply it to whatever you are facing or dealing with right now. So, spiritual mind healing, how does Ernest Holmes begin how does he begin this chapter? With this summary. In the preceding 18 chapters of this book, the one object in mind has been to uncover humanity's spiritual nature and the relationship to God and the universe. Therefore, instead of the usual recapitulation of the 6 chapters just concluded, we propose to make this an informal discussion of the general theme of how to give a mental treatment. How to give a mental treatment. So Ernest Holmes in this chapter really goes over what you need to believe and what you need to be doing in treatment so that you can use mental treatment, spiritually guided mental treatment, in order to shift or change your experience of condition. I'm going to say that slightly differently, but again, we use spiritual mind treatment to shift condition, to shift or transform our experience of condition, to navigate conditions. We do not use spiritual mind treatment or spiritual principle to pretend that something that is happening isn't happening. That would be bypassing the condition itself. We don't pretend, we don't fool ourselves. We actually change the way that we think about it. We shift what influence we have on what's going on in the world, in our situation, and in the way that we think about it. And we contribute to the collective consciousness or awareness and bring about transformation through those changes. So I love how he starts this chapter. Spirituality is natural goodness. Okay, just stop right there. Spirituality is natural goodness. We are in connection with, in contact with, in communication with, in understanding of the nature of God is good. Therefore, the nature of life must be good. The nature of it, the organic, natural, spiritual, divine nature of it is good. And we have to start there. We must start there. So Spirituality is natural goodness. God is not a person. God is a presence personified in us. Spirituality is not a thing. It is the atmosphere of God's presence, God's goodness, God's truth, and God's beauty. And I'm just taking that in and giving you time too to take it in, because it's simple. The words are simple. And sometimes we just have to breathe and let them soak in or marinate in just a little bit. At the beginning of the last paragraph on page 308, Ernest Holmes writes, "If there is one thing we should learn, it is that spiritual treatment must not be confused with mental concentration. A treatment in itself is an active thing, just like when you are taking an aspirin or Tylenol or Advil because you have a headache or because your muscles are sore. It is a treatment, and that medication is acting with the physical aspect of your body to replace the pain with peace in the cells of your body, right? So a spiritual treatment or a spiritual mind treatment is an entity in itself that is interacting with your mental, spiritual, emotional, and physical self, and the mental, emotional, collective consciousness, and physical activity of the collective. Because anything that you are doing is a contribution to the collective. So when Ernest Holmes writes, a treatment is an active thing, he goes on to say, if we are going to treat by a technique, by a method or procedure, then we are going to treat by a mental process. If we are going to reduce spiritual treatment to a mental science, then there is a method, a technique, and a procedure in mental treatment. There is certain mental attention we should have in giving a treatment, but this is different from the popular idea of mental concentration, as though we must hold the mind to one thought for a certain period of time. And that is what is changing or shifting what is happening. On the top of page 309, he suggests that we put ourselves in this mindset. Start with this simple proposition. The nature of God, of man, and of being, and life is perfect, harmonious, whole. Perfect God, perfect man, perfect being. And in treatment, you are conforming your thought to this concept, to this idea that God is perfect. God has created perfection in humanity or in man, in the individual, and the life of that individual then or therefore flows out as perfect. That this is the design of humanity and of life. The reason we have something that is different from that design and we notice it is our purpose for using, applying spiritual mind treatment. So in the spiritual mind treatment, we are returning, we are speaking or writing based on the belief that there is perfect God, perfect man, perfect being. And everything we think or write or speak in that mental treatment or prayer is coming from that place of truth and returning whatever is out of alignment to that place of truth. Now, I'm reflecting on saying it that way. If you have been studying science of mind for a while, I am hoping that that makes perfect and immediate sense to you. But I'm also aware that some of you are not as experienced with science of mind. And so I'm really reflecting, am I saying it in a way that someone who has very limited exposure to the philosophy of science of mind could still understand it? And that's not really easy, because if you, like me, have been studying it for a long time and practicing it for a long time, I get reminded all the time that I'm on automatic. I understand it. I'm living it. I know what I'm talking about. And so, yeah, if you see me breathing and reflecting for just a minute, it's because I'm challenging myself to break it down to a level where someone with very limited exposure to these thoughts and these ideas can find a place to connect in. So in this chapter 19, again, what Ernest Holmes' goal is to really provide what is needed to use spiritual mind treatment and not just understand it. So in these first few pages, he does go back to what is the basis of it, which is partly understanding, but reinforcing that you are praying from that place. You are designing your spiritual mind treatment for healing because you know and believe without a doubt in perfect God, perfect man, perfect being. So when you believe that and understand that, he spends the rest of page 309 kind of saying, well, when you believe that, then you begin to believe this, and you begin to trust that this is so. And that puts you into the position to be able to treat or pray or to do a spiritual mind treatment. And at the bottom of page 309, and remember, this was written, this is the revised version. So this is written in the 1930s. And he writes, recent research in the field of physics has revealed that this metaphysical abstraction is the thing that physics begins with: energy and intelligence. So in the early part of the 20th century, science was beginning to reinforce or document what the philosophy had been teaching through mystics and philosophers for a really long time, truly for centuries. So when we talk about science of mind and spirit, we actually do know that these beliefs are replicable, they are repeatable, they are documentable, you're able to document them, and that all of the things that we say make something scientific apply in the philosophy when you understand it and when you use it properly. So if this is making sense to you, then I'm loving that you are in the chat. And I just want to encourage you to continue to post in the chat. So saying good morning, I love it, I love it, I love it. And if you like, or I know about perfect man, perfect God, perfect man, perfect being, that really resonates with me, you can drop that into the chat as well. But let's keep going. Let's keep going. So on 310 and 311, Ernest Holmes continues to make the link between these basic principles that are coming from a philosophical point of view and build the bridge between the science of it. The fact that these things have been proven, these beliefs have been proven over and over and over again. And he takes a few pages to do that because he's reminding us that we have to understand that if we want to understand why our prayers work. And then I'm going to jump over to page 314, I think. Let me just check here. 313, last paragraph. After talking about the link between the philosophy and the science, he begins to really make the connection to the way of life. Right on the cover of Science of Mind, we always refer to it's a faith, a philosophy, and a way of life. And so he's made this connection between the philosophy and science, and he begins to move into like how it really works and why we should have faith in it. And at the top of page 313, he begins clarifying the individualization of the universal comes to a point in the personal, right? So at the bottom of page 313, last paragraph, we are therefore members of the universe, and being members of that which unites everything, we are some part of each other. Repeating, we are therefore members of the universe, and being members of that which unites everything, we are some part of each other. And so what allows us to do spiritually grounded healing is that we are perfect man, perfect humanity created by perfect God. And because all of us have each individually been perfectly created, we are connected to one another because we have the same source. So that gives us the power to influence what happens in the collective. I'm just taking a breath so you can take a breath as well. I can go through this and I can get, those of you who have heard me, give a talk or something, I'll get going and it's just flowing. And I'm really, really monitoring myself to slow down and give it time to soak in so that it's soaking in for you as well in terms of how you can actually apply this. So he ends that paragraph with, thus is the Father glorified in the Son. So if you have a background in biblical teaching or Christianity in general, then you will relate to this idea that you have been made in the spiritual image and likeness of God, or that which created you. So we have the power to be creative in our world. Quoting Ernest Holmes, our thought then is creative in our world. Macrocosm, the big world, and microcosm, the little world. We reproduce the cosmos in our individual world. The Father is greater than the Son, yet the Father is the Son, and we are each other, and it is in all of us. So every day we are living from this unity and projecting the experiences from it upon the screen of our objective lives. We have done this so long in ignorance that we appear to be bound by the outlines of the forms which our ignorance has projected. That is what Plato meant when he gave us the story of the slaves in the cave. They saw the shadows of bondage and thought they were bound, while all the while the chains had no reality. What are the things in your own life where you have created your own limitations? And they're limitations that no one else put upon you, but because of your beliefs, because of your believing that you either don't have to do something, or you don't need to do something, or you don't like to do something, that then you blame others, versus understanding that it doesn't matter what anyone else has said or done before. The limitation is only yours because you have claimed the limitation. Now, it gets really interesting when we realize, oh, but if I change the limitation, or if I stop believing in it, then I have to do things differently. That's the place where healing breaks down. Because a lot of times we want to intellectually believe that we are without limitation, but we continue to live in the same pattern of choices and actions that we have used for years, if not decades. So we have the power to change, and a part of the process of using that power can be the use of spiritual mind healing. So I love the comment, Diego. Thank you. Our thoughts are our prayers. And it's funny that a lot of people don't really think about it that way. But really, the things that we think about, the thoughts that we repeat over and over, consciously or unconsciously, are designing our lives. And so it is beautiful that science has corroborated this truth, but our mystics, our philosophers, and Ernest Holmes have told us this forever. The mystics in every religious tradition have told us to focus on what we want. They have described the law of attraction in different ways in different faith systems. Our mystics have told us that it's up to us to change the experience of the world. Philosophers and mystics have said this forever. And how fabulous is it that in the last 100 years, science has proven through quantum physics that, oh, we really are shaping the world that we experience. So I'm not going to get into quarks and waves and all of the quantum physics terms today, since we are the Saturday Morning Science of Mind conversation series. But if you have any interest at all in reading more about how physics has demonstrated everything that we are talking about, then just do a search on quantum physics, or how humans influence the creation of matter. Anything, search anything like that, and you'll be fascinated about how these things align with what we teach from a spiritual perspective. On page 315, Emerson says to cast them upon every wind of heaven, do not hold them. Beware of holding too much good in your hand. And what Ernest Holmes is referring to here is a summary he does right before this about we can demonstrate or experience any and everything that we want, anything that we desire, as long as it doesn't harm others, right? And we wish to demonstrate. What do we mean by demonstration? Nothing peculiar, nothing weird, nothing that pertains to ghost walking. To demonstrate means to prove, to exemplify, to manifest, to bring forth, to project into our experience something that is better than what we had yesterday. So, in the secular or everyday world, I come across a lot of people who will complain, right? They know what they don't want. Ernest Holmes writes, people want less pain, less unhappiness, less poverty, less misery, and more good. Well, when we understand that basic concept of perfect God, perfect being, perfect, wrong order, perfect God, perfect man, perfect being, then we understand that good is natural. And so we focus when we are in prayer on describing the good we want to experience. We don't have to focus on the bad or the painful. We don't have to keep talking about it, because if we are manifesting or demonstrating good, it is taking the place of what is bad or painful or hurtful, etc. So I did a spiritual mind treatment yesterday for a friend who has been experiencing the ups and downs of cancer treatment for almost a year, and was recently, a few days ago, released from the hospital and assigned to hospice care because the doctors do not know or do not believe there's anything else they can do. And I'll tell you, it was tempting. And through the last 10 months, it has been tempting to want to pray to fight the cancer, to beat up the cancer, to eliminate the cancer, to curse the cancer. And there are times when we are doing a spiritual mind healing where we will find ourselves doing that because we're human and we are grounded in the human experience. But the whole purpose of the spiritual treatment is to get beyond the human experience where only goodness exists. And so I found myself, as I was speaking this treatment, reminding myself of the goodness of wholeness and every cell knowing what to do, and replacing any pain in the body with peace. And because the peace that is natural and passes human understanding is the spiritual prototype for peace. So it's like, oh, I had to consciously shift from my human experience to ground myself in the spiritual truth and speak from that place about what is present in the spiritual truth. That is what this entire chapter is preparing us to do. So On page 319, Ernest Holmes moves from reminding us of the grounding for actively engaging with spiritual truth as the place from which we pray. He begins a section on page 319 that is titled Brief Reminders on How to Give a Spiritual Mind Treatment. And this is what he focuses on for the remaining 6 or so pages in the chapter. So, knowing that we have about 10 minutes, I'm going to spend the remaining time there because that's really where the rubber meets the road. Can you write or speak a treatment that will shift condition, that will change things? So let's see what Ernest Holmes has to say about this. He starts with this sentence or this paragraph. Suppose when one begins to treat, a great surge of fear comes over them, arguing that they cannot give a good treatment. The thing to do is to first treat this fear as a suggestion which has no power and which therefore cannot convince them that they lack the power to heal. They should say, there is nothing in me which can doubt my ability to heal. This alone will neutralize the fear and free their effort. Now, what I love about this is it is the reminder of what I just described. The human fear and the human doubt may be there. And so we have to talk ourselves out of that, or talk ourselves up to a higher consciousness. Some of you have heard me in treatment or in prayer begin with, let's go upstairs. And of course, I usually will acknowledge that that was a phrase that Homer Johnson, an African-American leader in our movement a few decades ago, that he used a lot, and it resonates with me so much that now I use it a lot. Because when we are doing a spiritual mind treatment or using spiritual mind healing, that's exactly what we are doing. We are going up in consciousness. We are ascending from the human consciousness of limitation into a spiritual consciousness of infinite wisdom, infinite love, infinite power, infinite ability to demonstrate or manifest anything that we want, anything that we need, anything that is required for our lives to be good, anything that contributes to the collective in a positive way. It doesn't mean every manifestation is instantaneous. It means that when I am praying or treating from that place, I actually am rising above the human limitation. Maybe you have an example of a time when either you did a spiritual treatment, or maybe you have an example of a time when someone else did a treatment for you and you recognized, like maybe it was even a visceral feeling of moving up, of shifting and breaking the chains of that limitation. This is what gives us the physical feeling that treatment is working. And of course, we know that when whatever it is we're praying about occurs, or we see demonstrations of it, we absolutely know that it's working there as well. But if you have a specific example of when you have moved yourself from human limitation just in speaking the prayer or writing the prayer, where you actually believed this is possible, or maybe even stronger, where you had that visceral belief and trust and faith that it's not just possible, it is happening right now. And if you have an example like that, feel free to drop it in the chat. And if you don't have an example like that, then start looking for it when you are recognizing that you are consciously moving. So Ernest Holmes reminds us that we must be in that place. And if we're not there, we can declare ourselves there by saying something like, there's nothing in me which can doubt my ability to heal or to change or to shift, whatever verb is appropriate for you. He goes on to remind us that there's no magic about how long you should do a treatment or how long you should treat for a specific thing. He basically reminds us that you can treat every day, but if you do, that he says, begin each treatment as if you had never done that treatment before, right? Every treatment, every prayer is a new prayer. Because think about this. I don't know, this was probably about 15 years ago, 10 to 15 years ago. And I knew that every prayer, every treatment is a new one. It's a fresh start. Intellectually, I had mastered that concept. But I realized when I was treating for something, I wasn't always saying the words, but my feeling was, because I still don't have it. Well, it hasn't happened yet, so I'm going to do a treatment again. And 10 to 15 years ago, one day I heard myself thinking that, and I was like, oh, well, of course. I have bought into this idea that I don't have it and I must do a new treatment every day. But I really have this little edge of resentment because I think I should already have done it. I mean, I've been treating for this for 30 days. Why hasn't it happened? And I was all in my human stuff, right? And that day I was like, oh, no, it actually is already complete. And every piece of the puzzle that needs to be fit together for it to become a physical experience in my life, that's happening. And my treatment that day, my prayer that day had a completely different energy because I no longer felt I was like doing this prayer for the 100th time because God really must not be listening to me or paying attention to what I need. And I'll just keep doing it until God gets on board with it, right? And of course, I wasn't consciously thinking any of that, but it matters where you are coming from and what you are believing. Is it in alignment with what you know and what you're saying? So this whole idea of you can treat every day, because really it is a new treatment and it is aligning with the truth, but you're not really doing the same treatment. You are adding energy to something that is in progress. You are speaking gratitude for the fact that the puzzle pieces are beginning to fit together. You're noticing this element that feeds into the overall delivery of the prayer request. All of these are just building a stronger foundation for whatever it is that you are praying for. Ernest Holmes also answers a few questions in this section about do you, when you are in prayer about anything, that you can also, and you must also be doing the human actions that support that, right? So if you are doing prayer for healing because you've been diagnosed with COVID, prayer works, and you should be taking your medication or getting sleep or staying safe, right? Quarantining. That the human activity is important as in addition to the spiritual activity, because spirit is working all the invisible pieces that need to be worked, and spirit is relying on you to do your part. And that's why it doesn't work when you pray for one thing, but your behavior and actions are the complete opposite, right? You pray to have a promotion or to have a job that pays a certain amount of money, but you'll never be hired for that job, even though spirit can make it happen, because you are not demonstrating the qualities of taking responsibility or managing the income that you have now in a positive way. And that's what on the human side has to happen for you to be able to be that candidate that someone would hire for that promotion. So the other things that are in these last few pages of the chapter, again, are how do we actually use treatment, and that the belief is so important. And let's see if there's one thing that I want to highlight before we close out today. Yes. So on page 322, this third paragraph, since the law, the spiritual law, is mental, one must believe in it in order to have it work affirmatively for you. But it is always working according to your belief, whether you are conscious of this truth or not. That's critical, because when we are doing spiritual treatment, we have to realize whatever we're thinking, as was said earlier in the chat, whatever we're thinking actually is our true prayer, whatever we're thinking over and over and over again. So our thinking must be in alignment, because we are the ones who set the power in motion, and the law produces the effect. So if any of this interests you, and you find that now is the time for you to learn more about how to use spiritual mind treatment, then I strongly recommend that you go forward, if you have a copy of the Science of Mind textbook, and read or reread this chapter 19, because it really captures the mindset and the way to apply what you know about spiritual mind treatment. And we have finished section 3 in the Science of Mind textbook. And beginning next week, we'll start diving into, with chapter 20, what the mystics have taught. Part 4 of the Science of Mind textbook is about the perfect whole, the indivisible whole. And Ernest Holmes studied so many of the other major religious systems, and recognized that the mystics of those faith systems were teaching so much of the same thing. That's what Science of Mind does. It synthesizes the common thread between different spiritual systems. So next week, we get to spend a few weeks diving into what the mystics taught, how we can use that. And I can hardly wait. So please join us for the Science of Mind and Spirit Saturday morning conversations every chance you get. We're here every Saturday. And between Saturdays, there is so much fabulous programming on the New Thought Media Network. And so I encourage you to please, please stop in for prayer, stop in for programming about joy and prosperity and every other topic that is important to you. My name is Tracy Brown. I'm so glad that you were with me today, and please, we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, for your continued support. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, for your monthly contribution. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, for your monthly contribution. And please help us welcome Om Center for Spiritual Living in La Mesa, California. Thank you for your monthly donation. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, for your most generous donation. And a special thanks to Hefferlin Foundation for your generous technology grant. And Suze Ajit, thank you for your very generous donation. And a super special thank you to Dr. Tracy Brown RScP. Thanks for being a super donor. And a big shout out to all our committed donors.